the man said a few moments later. "Yes, Mike," the woman replied, as firefighters rushed past her. "That is correct. Grian Woods, Geoffrey Slight, and a wild girl who we believe goes by the name Shelli, the very same children who only moments before the explosion were celebrated as heroes all over our screens for saving the life of Howard Hansom himself. Police don't think the children were acting alone, though. They are believed to be members of a group called the Proctors, who have been trying to sabotage Howard Hansom and the tipping point since his plans to save the planet first came to light. The Proctors are a group of radical tilt deniers who believe the planet hasn't shifted on its axis, and that the earthquake was a hoax." "Ah, what an elaborate hoax that would be," the man in the studio snorted, as the TV screen cut to pictures of Grian and his friends Shelli and Geoffrey on stage earlier that night in the Tipping Point auditorium. Grian huffed angrily and switched off Bob, his handsome watch. The news report was all lies. Chapter 2. Our Secret. The treehouse Grian sat in belonged to the Wild community, who had taken in him, Shelli and Geoffrey when they fled the tipping point earlier that night. The Wild lived simply in the forest, in tune with the rhythms of nature. They didn't trust technology and, unlike almost everybody else in the world, they had never fallen for Howard Hansom's lies. Most people in Babbage thought the Wild were weird. Grian lay back on his beanbag, frustrated. He wasn't just angry at the news report. He was angry with himself for daring to turn on his watch again, because, unlike only a few days before, now he knew the truth. Bob wasn't his friend, and Howard Hansom and his technologies could not be trusted. He had only turned on his watch because he had been desperately trying to reach his granddad again, when the news report flashed across his screen. On impulse, he had swiped it open, then couldn't look away. Grian knew the report was all lies, but he was sure most people would believe it. He longed to go back to the time when he was like most people, when his watch was his best friend and Howard Hansom, the wealthiest and smartest tech entrepreneur ever, had all the answers and was going to save the world. Grian's sharp learning curve had begun when his sister, Solus, ran away to the tipping point to help save the world, and his granddad, who had been minding them, went to find her. When Grandad never came back and black-cloaked strangers turned up at their house, Grian was forced into a dark adventure with his neighbour, Geoffrey, and a wild girl called Shelli. The adventure led them to the tipping point and to the eventual discovery that the black mark on the sun hadn't been created because the Earth had shifted on its axis, that the volunteers who had signed up to live in the tipping point had in fact become Howard Hansom's prisoners, kept in cages beneath his smart city, and that everything the tech entrepreneur promised the world was a lie. And now, even though Grian and his friends had managed to save his sister and a few of the volunteers from Hansom's clutches, the situation was somehow worse than ever. Grian's granddad was gone, kidnapped by Hansom and taken somewhere on his high-speed hover train, the Hyperloop, along with the rest of the volunteers who'd signed up to live in the tipping point. And the black mark on the sun had grown so big it now filled a quarter of its face. "You'll be the most hated boy in Babbage," Howard Hansom had promised Grian only hours before. And the man was right. Grian's face, along with those of Geoffrey and Shelli, was all over every news channel, watch face, billboard and bus stop in Babbage and across the planet, all because of the false story of blame that the tech billionaire had concocted and spread through his Hansom-owned media networks to divert attention away from whatever evil it was he had planned. Solus, his sister, snorted loudly in her sleep, pulling Grian from his thoughts. She was curled up on a beanbag across from him, in the treetop hut swaying gently in the wind. Grian felt for the small package in his pocket and pulled out the cream drawstring bag his granddad had given him in secret, just before he was kidnapped. Inside the bag was a piece of yellow rock crystal and a letter. The letter and crystal were from a mysterious person called the White Rose, who seemed to know what was happening to the sun and how to stop it. Hansom was desperate to find this person too, so much so he'd kidnapped Grian's granddad, convinced he knew something,